you started?
Yeah, it was very easy.
Oh no. Welcome back to another vlog. Hope you're all doing okay. It is Saturday today and I honestly could not be more relieved and grateful that it's the weekend. It's been a really intense and long week, but I've got my cup of tea and I thought let me just start the vlog like properly, because I've filmed lots of little clips here and there over the last couple of weeks and I've not really talked in this vlog yet. So yeah, I thought I'd chat a little bit about how my reading's been going, because I really enjoyed filming that bit of the last vlog and had lots of really nice comments about chatting about reading. So I thought I'd just talk a little bit about something I've been doing recently, which is taking more notes on my books. I have always been someone who prefers to read with like a bit more intention. The majority of the time, because of the types of books that I enjoy reading, I want to take something from it that's going to impact my life, and I also want to be able to talk about the book in a intelligent, you know, self-aware way, more than just, yeah, I enjoyed it, because obviously that's what I like to do. I love talking about reading and I love recommending books. It's important to me that I actually know what kind of book I'm recommending to people and why. I've always been, you know, someone who likes to underline things. I like to dog-ear pages and come back to them, and that act of kind of dog-earing or underlining bits of the book, indicating that this is something that I want to come back to, I want to revisit, I want to explore this more afterwards rather than right now, always helps to kind of solidify what I'm reading into my brain rather than just letting the book wash over me, which sometimes is also fine. Not every single book I read is one where I dog ear loads of pages and want to remember loads of quotes. But what I've noticed about my reading a little bit this year so far is that it felt a little bit wishy-washy to me. It didn't feel very intentional. And that's also because something I used to do is take notes on my books. I used to really like, once I'd finished a book, just writing some reflections on it, and obviously that manifested a little bit more into like reviews and stuff online, which I don't tend to write on every book that I read anymore. It's usually more unusual books or books that I don't see people talking about very much, or books that have really stood out to me and I really feel like I have something worthwhile to say on them. So I kind of wanted to set myself a bit of a challenge this year to write notes on every book that I read, just for myself in a notebook, try and piece together some reflections on every book I read, essentially, to give the books more longevity with me in my life, rather than just picking them up, reading them, putting them down, forgetting about them. And that's just personal to me. That's just reflective also of the types of books I like to read and what I want to gain from my reading experience. Everyone's reasons for reading are different, and what people want to achieve out of reading and get out of reading is different for everyone, and this is kind of more reflective of what I love about reading, essentially. And I was thinking about this, and then I saw Sunbeam's Jess, who I really love, I've loved for ever since the very beginning of her channel. I'm so happy that she does more book content now. So Sunbeam's Jess posted a video about her note-taking process, how she always takes notes, and kind of the way that she does it, and I felt really inspired by that. So and that was really helpful to me as well, to kind of think of a method of how to do it, because I've had lots of different methods in the past and I've not really stuck to any of them long term. Essentially, I bought a reading notebook. This is just one of the Leuchtturm sort of bullet journals, but essentially it's just almost like a list of the books that I'm reading. I kind of, yeah, start a new heading with the title of the book, and then, yeah, I have been doing these notes after I read the book. Sometimes maybe during, but usually afterwards, and I spend like maybe half an hour to an hour just thinking and, yeah, reflecting on my reading experience and writing down some quotes, and I've really been enjoying it. I found that the practice of being more intentional about my reading really kind of then seeps into my reading habits, and I feel I read a little bit slower, a little bit kind of not skimming as much. I'm actually taking things in a bit more, I'm concentrating a little bit more. I'm thinking about the books I'm reading a lot more when I'm not reading them, just in my day-to-day life. Yeah, I'm just a lot more aware of how the book makes me feel, what it's bringing up for me, how I maybe don't relate to it or do relate to it, what it's teaching me about the world, about the perspectives and experiences of the characters in the book. To be honest, it's also so that I can talk more about reading and actually have something meaningful to say when I speak about the books that I'm reading. I don't just want to rattle off the synopsis and then be like, yeah, no, it was really good, I really enjoyed it, because honestly I could say that about the majority of the books I read, but every book I read is different, and my reasons for enjoying them are different, and my reasons for maybe recommending them or not recommending them are different. So I want to be able to have meaningful conversations about books and know that I'm recommending something worthwhile, and be able to really paint a picture for people who haven't read it, or be able to have meaningful discussions with people who have read it. Yeah, I really am looking to kind of enrich this hobby of mine a bit more. I'll probably come back to this at a later point in the vlog and talk about what I have actually been reading recently. Yeah, I'll do that a bit later.
I don't care, Are you vlogging?
Yeah. The vow has spent the entire day with me.
I have, and it still wasn't enough.
And it still wasn't enough. We could still keep talking.
We could, actually. Oh shit, 2 minutes.
Okay, let's get you ready to go. Are you gonna be in the video, Claudia? So, as promised, I am going to talk you through some of the books that I've been reading recently. The first book I'm going to talk about is All Yours by Claudia Piñeiro. This is one of her backlist titles. I've only ever read her more recent publications with Charco Press, which are A Little Luck, which came out last year, and Elena Knows, which, as you all know, is one of my favourite books of all time. Josie from Books on Buses on Instagram read a lot of her backlist last year and for Women in Translation Month, and really inspired me to just have a look at the backlist of some of my favourite authors, Claudia Piñeiro included. So I thought I'd start with this one, which is a kind of more of like a crime thriller, psychological thriller-esque housewife discovering that her husband has been cheating on her, and she is trying to figure out what her place and her role is in all of that, because she witnessed her husband essentially murdering the woman who she thinks that he is cheating on her with. In some ways it's very different to her other books in the kind of subject matter and the tone of the book, and you can see that her writing voice has definitely matured a lot over the years. Inez, the main character, the narrator, is definitely an unreliable narrator. She's very naive, she's very frustrating. It feels like she's always a step behind everyone, not just the characters in the book but also the audience. I feel like she's kind of always a step behind, which definitely makes her quite an interesting narrator. She does kind of catch up in the end, but it is hard to know whether you're sort of rooting for her or not. She's so oblivious, particularly to the life that her daughter Laura is leading. Her daughter is 17. She's not a very present mother. Inez, definitely her main focus is Ernesto, her husband. Ernesto is her everything, as he's her world, which you can also see in the way that Inez responds to her husband's potential infidelity, and also the fact that he's murdered someone who she thinks he's having an affair with. There's a lot of twists and turns. Initially you kind of think it's pretty straightforward story, and it's really not. And I think having Inez as the first person narrator definitely adds to that, because you've got no idea really where the story's going, because a lot of the things that she thinks she knows isn't true. It really reminded me of Mrs. March, which was one of my favourite books I read last year. Quite a, rompy but still psychological thriller elements to it. It was just really good to see how she's evolved as a storyteller as well, but see where her kind of early voice started, and I really enjoyed this one. So next I read two books which are about disability. So just so you're aware, the next segment is going to be talking about living with a disability, potentially end of life because of a disability, and definitely some like medical trauma and things like that, so just be aware. So first of all, I read Intervals by Marianne Brooker. Fitzcarraldo very kindly sent this to me because I saw that they were publishing this, and I think it won some kind of award very recently. Immediately, as soon as I saw what it was about, I was like, yeah, I really need to read that. Intervals is a memoir. Marianne Brooker is talking about her experience of caring for her mother who has MS, quite a severe and degenerative form of MS, which is not going to get better. And essentially, Marianne's mother decides to voluntarily stop eating and drinking in order to end her life. What it says on the back is, determined to die in her own home on her own terms, she stopped eating and drinking in 2019. I honestly barely even know where to begin with this book, because as you can see, I've dog-eared so many pages, and pretty much every other page I've dog-eared and highlighted something, because there is just so much in here that really touched me and really moved me. There's a lot that I learned from this book, because Marianne kind of ties together the elements of the memoir, but also talks about different kind of quotes, different feminist or disabled philosophers and activists, and really has a lot of research supporting her personal story, kind of on the topic of living and dying well, and what that means to her, what that meant to her mum. It kind of really raises a lot of questions and discussion topics around autonomy, and how that also intersects with other things, such as particularly in this book, class, socioeconomic situations, and how that impacts your ability to live and die well and on your own terms. When her mum is going through the kind of final months of her life, and probably for the majority of her mum's disability, they are living in quite extreme austerity with a lot of heavy dependence on the state to provide benefits for them and to provide living conditions for them and that kind of thing. There's quite a lot of quotes, but one of my favourite ones was, Marx and Engels write that society tacitly manipulates our will. It does not throw you out, but it makes it so uncomfortable for you that you go out of your own will. In that sense, my mum made her choice willingly, but not freely. The questions then are not, did she jump or was she pushed, but was there even ground beneath her feet? What kind of world have we built for one another? It was an incredibly beautiful book, like beautifully written, and actually, despite the quite heavy subject matter, fairly easy to read in the sense that it was not overly complex. It was just really, really well written. So it's in that sense, it's a really accessible book. It's incredibly intense. It's really, really sad. I cried multiple times. And for me, obviously, it's not just about empathizing with this story, but also kind of seeing things that I relate to, parts of my own life reflected back at me. Reading from the perspective of a carer is sometimes really hard because it kind of highlights to you the ways that your illness might make life harder for somebody else. But I found that, yeah, she really holds the balance very well of talking about her own experience as a carer, particularly as you know, a daughter caring for her mother. They're both adults, but I do think that kind of role reversal is really impactful and definitely adds an extra element to the story. So yeah, she kind of talks about that, but then also really keeps the focus to her mum's experience, her mum's pain, her mum's reasons for doing this. This really feels like an extension of her mum's legacy. And she's really, really honest about how much she struggled with her mum's decision and how much she maybe selfishly didn't want her mum to die, even though it was so plainly obvious that her mum was no longer living well, no longer had a good quality of life, no longer was living a life that she felt was worthwhile to her, that the pain wasn't worth it anymore. Being dead was no great fear of hers, but being compelled to live was killing her. I think she was really, really, really honest about those feelings, but it never felt like she was trying to make it about her. And I have read or especially heard of other books that are written kind of from the perspective of a carer, which don't do that, which don't preserve the dignity and the integrity of the person being cared for. I think this is a really beautiful and an incredibly important read. And if you feel like you can handle it, definitely pick it up. And then finally, I'm going to talk about Body Friend by Katherine Brabon, I think. This is fiction. It's about a woman, an unnamed narrator, talking about her experience of recovering from an operation, and she meets two different women in quite close succession who you realise as the reader that these two women are kind of two different parts of the narrator, almost reflected back at her. These two women that she meets, Frida and Sylvia, are there to kind of mirror the narrator in some way, different parts of the narrator and different parts of how different perspectives of how the narrator feels about her illness and feels about being disabled. I have done a lot of therapy, and one of the types of therapies that my therapist and I do together is called internal family systems, or IFS, which basically is the concept that you are made up of many, many parts of you, all of which represent different traumas, different desires, different fears, and those different parts kind of are brought up or triggered by different things. And the whole concept is that there are no bad parts, there are just misunderstood parts or parts that are lashing out or triggered parts, but there's nothing in you that is inherently bad or inherently malicious or inherently trying to hurt you. It's about understanding the motivation of those parts and why they are coming up for you in that way. And this really felt like a fictional kind of embodiment of that. It felt really like Sylvia and Frida were two parts of the narrator, and that her kind of meeting them was, yeah, a way of illustrating the ways that those parts can come up and show up for us sometimes. So, you know, you're sort of seeing the two parts as real people with their own traumas, belief systems, motivations, and that makes those voices really real. Frida very much feels like she wants to be out in the world, she doesn't want to be restricted, and therefore she believes that her health is almost in her control, that if she swims every day, she won't get sick. Sylvia, on the other hand, is very much about rest, stopping, softening, pulling back. You know, rest is good, rest is giving your body what it needs, you don't need to push, it's okay to let go. But that then very quickly becomes a withdrawing from people. So that felt really interesting to read about those two kind of polar opposites, which are in contradiction to one another seemingly and fight one another. And yeah, it was just a really interesting way of exploring illness, I suppose. I found it almost a bit too close to home because of how much I recognise the two voices and the two characters of Frida and Sylvia and the things that they stood for and their beliefs and the way that those things manifest. It felt a little bit like she was in my brain. It was very relatable, very beautiful, and I think it's a good one for people who don't have a chronic illness to help you understand the kinds of internal battles that someone might be facing mentally and also physically. I would definitely recommend all three of those. They're very different, but I love them all. So yeah,